Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week, we kick off a retrospective in honor of the late, great Sir Christopher Lee with Count Dracula, directed by Jess Franco. This movie was made in 1969, came out in 1970, so it was Jess Franco's Dracula. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from their perspective, from horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With me from Austin is Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online, creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also in Austin, special guest Jamie Barr, a musician, pinup model, educator, lead vocalist, and upright bassist for Austin's premier all-female rock and roll band, Danger Cakes. You can find about their latest shows and their album Quarter Life Crisis at dangercakes.net. And Quarter Life Crisis just came out, isn't that right?
Yep. So, yay!
Yay! And welcome, Jamie. Welcome back once again.
Thank you.
All right.
Good to be back.
And once again, from Los Angeles tonight, Adam Foshko, writer and creative consultant for Activision's Call of Duty Exo Zombies, the explosive new episodic Zombie Fest starring John Malkovich, Bill Baxton, John Bernthal, Rose McGowan, and Bruce Evil Dead Campbell. Gosh, we got to see some cool Bruce this week, as well as screenwriter for the upcoming Skylanders Superchargers, due out later this year. Hello, Adam.
Hi.
Welcome back. Okay.
Hey.
All right. Are we ready to talk Dracula?
Oh, yeah.
That's a rhetorical question. Of course we are. But, all right. According to Wikipedia, Count Dracula, or All Night When Dracula Awakes, as it was known in Germany, in Spain as El Conde Dracula, many names, is a 1969 Spanish-Italian-German horror film released in 1970, directed by Jess Franco and starring Christopher Lee, Herbert Lammott, and Klaus Kinski. It was based on the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker and thought at the time to be one of the most faithful renditions of the novel. Although Count Dracula stars Christopher Lee in the title role, says Wikipedia, it is not a Hammer production, like his other Dracula films, produced instead by Harry Alan Towers. Klaus Kinski, who would play Dracula himself 9 years later in Nosferatu, which we have covered in another episode, which you can find on iTunes, is also featured as Renfield. Count Dracula was advertised as the most faithful adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel, and it is the first film version of the novel in which Dracula begins as an old man and becomes younger as he feeds upon fresh blood. So, that was a mouthful, but I wanted to get a lot of that out there so we could kind of level set as to which movie and what the major things we're talking about are. Let's get our opening thoughts. Why don't we go Adam, Jamie, Drew, and then I'll go. Adam, keeping it to, short, like about a minute. Opening thoughts on Count Dracula.
Well, to put it in perspective, obviously, again, it's terrific that we're doing this retrospective through Christopher Lee, and this is an extremely fitting movie to do it with. And personally, I think it's terrific because it's not one that I'd seen. I'd heard about it, and it's if you walk in with any kind of real expectations, I think you're in for kind of a surprise. First of all, I want to rename this movie to the Zoomtanic Rights of Dracula because I've never seen so much use of a zoom lens. Obviously, we're zooming all over the place. But he's also the most articulate Dracula, certainly, of the time. And I think I'd even heard once upon a time, and that was one of the reasons why he picked the role. He wanted to do this particular production was because he just didn't want to be the Dracula who was always glaring and snarling at people. And they actually may have even used some lines from the Penny Dreadful or from the book. And he is very eloquent. There is a lot of that. I think it's an amazing movie. It is incredibly slow in places, though. And I love Herbert Lammott, and I love Klaus Kinski, although I think Kinski in particular is remarkably underused and restrained. But I'm really glad that I saw it. I think it's one that if you like if you like Christopher Lee and you like Dracula, you really must see this. And I was really glad that I did. It sort of had the promise of it's intriguing. I think it had the promise of maybe even Eurotrash. I think it just had like the kiss of Eurotrash, but just no prize. I think at the end of that, lots of people looking, lots of people falling, and the best acting for taxidermy that I'd ever seen. That's pretty much my whole take on it, and my first impressions in a nutshell. Take it away.
Excellent.
Well,
Go ahead, Jamie.
I don't really agree with you. I thought it was terrible. I was really excited to watch this movie, but I didn't have like any preconceived notions. I've seen enough Christopher Lee movies and enough Dracula movies and enough Hammer Dracula movies where I was like, all right, this will probably be good. And it just wasn't for me. Like, we had to stop the movie because neither Drew and I could stay awake during it. Yeah, it was, it was pretty rough, I have to say. Like, there were just too many times where I think things that are usually, a common theme throughout most of the Dracula movies, the damsel in distress being saved by the macho men, kind of just got to me too much. Like, I felt like there was the only purpose either female character really played was food, like, for Dracula. That's really it. And it was just like, I felt like I wasted an hour and a half, which felt like 3.5.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Okay, Brazen. Wasted an hour and a half. I think that's a good place to start. No, it's good.
Well, I kind of was like, man, this is what we're doing for the retrospective. Christopher Lee should be rolling over in his coffin.
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know about that. But it's good. It's good you feel that way because there's we definitely have room for debate on this one. Drew, so are you in the same boat? This is the longest 90 minutes of your life.
No. Okay. I've seen this movie twice. I saw it for the first time at the Lakewood in Dallas because they frequently showed old horror films, and I enjoyed it more the first time I saw it. I think because I was excited to see something that was kind of an oddity, and at the time hard to find, which is one of the reasons why I thought this would be good to do for the retrospective. I think this is about, to use Adam's language, this is half a picture and half a Z-grade flick. I love all of the stuff in Transylvania. I love Christopher Lee giving these big, long Stoker, direct from the novel, the blood, the brains, the sword of our people, that kind of stuff. I love all of that stuff. All the stuff in Dracula's castle is great. It looks great. The moment we get to the sanitarium, this turns into a sloppily done, unfortunately, a Jess Franco movie, because Jess Franco is about half a good director. I mean, and it's funny, on the documentary, he's kind of bogging, he's kind of dissing Terrence Fisher. Terrence Fisher was a much more competent director than Jess Franco. Let's just get that out of the way. That was some chest thumping on Franco's part. So once we get to the sanitarium, you have a really great cast that's kind of wasted, and a movie that just sort of meanders around, and a lot of actors acting against other actors that aren't actually there because they could not afford to keep them all at the same time. And it's very obviously done. So, again, I love all the stuff in Transylvania. I love Christopher Lee with his big mustache. I think when you get to the end where he's the Dracula with the jet black hair and the Fu Manchu mustache, he looks awesome. That's not enough to save the entire movie for me. However, I'm still glad that we're doing this because it is again, an oddity. You know, this is Dracula, but it's not the Hammer Dracula. And, you know, we've done a lot of Hammer Draculas. I think for this retrospective, it was good to do something a little off the beaten path.
The funny thing is, there's still a lot of Hammer Draculas we have yet to do. We've done Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires and Horror of Dracula, and I think that's about it. In other words, the bulk. I could have sworn we've done Brides of Dracula, but maybe I misremembered. No, we haven't even done Brides of Dracula. In other words, for some reason, I think we're all so. I don't know if intimidated is the right word, but you don't want to spend that particular cash unwisely, and so I think we've just continued to, for about 4 years now, just kind of let those sit there unremarked, and which is funny. Well, then maybe we should pop that open before we're done with this, but I'm glad that we're starting with this. That would be a good idea. Yeah, I agree. Okay, but as to Count Dracula, so I totally identify with what Jamie said, and with what you all said, but I remember distinctly back in college telling people, hey, you have to see Count Dracula. You know, this is one of the best performances of the character of Dracula I've ever seen. I love this movie. And they would see it, and 201, they would always come back to me, never willing to take advice from me on what to watch again, because they were always really unhappy with the film. To me, though, I love this movie. I think it's because that there are images in it. Dracula coming to the door with the candelabra, the wolves, even though they're not even good-looking wolves, the wolves moving behind the trees. You know, there's a lot of stuff that had a very profound effect on me as a young person, and those images still look good. There's a lot of now the movie itself is considering it's 90 minutes long, is really often pretty dull. And like every adaptation of Dracula, the moment they leave the whole Harker sequence at the beginning, everything just sort of gets slower. Unfortunately, that's a problem with Dracula. And it's a problem here. And it's not trashy nearly enough. I mean, in other words, Jess Franco has decided in this movie that he's going to make the classiest movie he can make. And sometimes it really pays off. And he's quite proud of that in that interview that's included on the DVD that Drew mentioned. But Jess Franco also, when you are getting bored, in most of his movies, gets trashy. He throws in nudity, he throws in whatever. There's none of that here. The Jess Franco stuff that I really like is the Christopher Lee Fu Manchu movies. And that's right. Yeah, but Franco, you know, there's a certain kind of grimy Spanish new wave look that uses all these practical sets and stuff like that he sometimes could aspire to. None of that's here. This is Eurotrash on its absolute best behavior. So I don't know. So anyway, let's get into it. Very early, I just want to mention that if you have a chance to see the documentary, there's it's really just an interview with Jess Franco, and he talks about making it, and he immediately calls out Coppola, and he says, "Look, my movie, Jess Franco's movie, is supposed to be the most true to the book," and he explains a few ways why it is. But he says, now Coppola says that his movie is the one that's truest to the book, and he says, now plot-wise, it may well be, but I love this. He goes, Coppola completely had no idea of the meaning of the film. His idea of the meaning of the film is completely wrong, and he goes, Dracula in Coppola's film wants to fall in love with the girl and walk around in the park with her, and he says that's a complete misunderstanding. So I thought that was great that I've always liked the Dracula conception here. So anyway, we begin with. Hey, Adam, are you still on? I see a California has hung up.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, well, that must have been a different California that has hung up. Okay, this movie begins with a look at these practical castles. We're not in a Hollywood movie, and we have the journey of Jonathan Harker. Drew, do you feel confident enough that you can give us sort of everything that happens as he
Well,
passes along.
he's in a coach. Sorry, he starts out on a train, and he's talking to this guy, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to meet Count Dracula at the Borgo Pass," and the guy gets really weirded out by that, and Jonathan Harker's like, "Oh, okay, did I say something wrong?" And then
there's a lot of those where somebody will say a line and go,
"Well, what's funny about it is how much it's like the Bela Lugosi Dracula tone-wise here. Well, and just the way the peasants act. They're all, it's a lot of Harker like talking about, "Oh, I'm going to see Dracula," and the peasants being like, oh, and I know Franco was, talks about how much he loves the Lugosi Dracula, so I can only think that that's deliberate. And he stays overnight in an inn, and the next day he gets in the coach with the exact same guy in it, and he gets off at the Borgo Pass, and the guy is like, "God go with you," and he's there, and then this coach and a cloaked coachman who is actually Dracula. It's Christopher Lee, although he looks very much like the Shadow when he's done up like this. And there's all this great fog, and he puts them in the coach, and there's German shepherds that are supposed to be wolves following the coach, and all that stuff I love. I just love that stuff to death because it is so unabashedly gothic.
Well, here's the thing though. I totally agree with that. I love these things, but they are terrible at the same time. There's some of the worst cinematography I've ever seen in any picture ever. It exists here, and some of the worst lighting I've ever seen ever, and some really miserable acting. However,
Jonathan Harker is terrible. The guy playing Jonathan Harker is terrible.
Yeah, although Julia thought that he was quite beautiful. That was that
he's a very handsome man that cannot act. The guy he's in, the other guy that's in the coachman, I don't know. He looks like he's been dubbed, so I don't want to blame the actor for what is most likely a poorly paid English-speaking voice actor doing his lines for him.
Yeah. There's some terrible stuff happening there, but the elements that you're talking about, particularly because we've seen a lot of Dracula. Again, I think I'm certainly looking through this. I'm looking through a lens at this, and not judging it on its own merits. I'm sort of putting, I think, in context of like other Dracula pictures or just what I've seen before, and the fact that it is so unusual to see this. I think I certainly give it more credit than maybe what it deserves, because it really is terribly done in places. But these are the best parts. All the stuff in Transylvania, by far the best.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, when I was a kid, and maybe this is no excuse for anything, but when I was a kid, these things of the coach, which are, he gets dropped off by one coach at the Borgo Pass. There's this whole section, which again is done in Nosferatu. It's done in every Dracula film. This section that is the Harker journey to see Dracula.
Except in the Universal one, it's Renfield.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's right. But they even use the bit from the book where he gets to the hotel, and the hotel go, "Hey, the Count has sent us a note saying to take good care of you," and so there all these beats are being put in. But I remember when he gets dropped off at the Borgo Pass, and that new coach, the darker coach driven by Dracula, shows up. I remember just being profoundly moved by that and the sound of the wolves. And there's one more thing that we haven't mentioned, but that to me sets this movie apart. I think this movie has one of the best scores ever for a Dracula film. In fact, maybe one of my favorite horror films.
Yeah, but how we were talking about Horror Express the other day?
Yes.
It's sort of reminiscent of that in a lot of ways, but it keeps.
Well, Jamie said it sounded a lot like the Hans Zimmer Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, that's what it is. It's the Sherlock Holmes one that was ding 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 ding.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Second one.
Totally right, Jamie. You are totally right.
Yeah.
I feel like
and
they actually kind of lifted it, and if some like there's certain parts where I feel like, this could border along copyright infringement.
I love how every time Dracula is a bat, he gets didgeridoo.
Yes, yeah. But the main instrument being used here, there's a lot of violins, there's a lot of these little piccolos, there's a lot of clarinet, but mainly there's this zither or zither, however the hell you say that. This basically this. It's a zither. Anyway, this hammered dulcimer basically that is being used for most of the score, and you have that all the time. Wonderful stuff. I've heard this score used as a needle drop on like scary TV shows for years. I mean, it's a really great score by Bruno Nicolai, who wrote a lot of he did a lot of Italian like spy movies and crime movies and horror movies. Guys like him and Ennio Morricone, who was doing the Western pictures. If you like make a Pandora, I recommend this. If you make a Pandora radio station of Bruno Nicolai, you'll get a lot of stuff like this and a lot of groovy, like other Italian horror and spy stuff that will make it feel like you're just living.
Funny you talk about this being sampled on stuff. The line where Christopher Lee goes, "Shadows of my past remain." Yeah. I had a goth rock compilation that had an Alien Sex Fiend song that had that sampled on it. And, when I was a teenager, I just knew that was, something. I always just assumed that was from one of the Hammers, and I somehow missed it. And when I finally saw this when I was in my 20s, and he said that, I remember, like, jumping for joy in my seat.
Oh, there's so many great lines in here. That's the other thing that is amazing to me when he said, skipping straight to that scene. This movie, I will forgive this movie every one of its dorky ass second half sins for the fact that basically the whole movie exists to let Christopher Lee walk around in front of a giant, truly giant fireplace and do this monologue that he himself lifted. Yeah, he lifted it from the book, basically.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much verbatim.
Yeah, Franco says that, at the point where Harker gets to the castle and Dracula lets him in and they have a little port or whatever and they're sitting next to and Jonathan Harker says some feeding line where like, "So, this is an old house, been in your family a while?" And Dracula gets up and Jess Franco, the director, said that what happened was they had expected that this whole scene would be cut. And so on the day of filming, Lee had really been lobbying to do the whole damn thing. To him, it was the to be and not to be speech. He wanted to do this whole monologue from Dracula from the book. And Franco's like, "You know what? Go for it. Do it." And they did. So he just reads this long thing, and including all those great lines like, "The wind grows cold across the broken battlements." I mean, can you imagine how awesome it is?
Well, the other thing, it does, like Franco did talk his trash about Hammer, and I will say this, it does exemplify the one thing that Hammer never capitalized enough on when they had Lee as Dracula, which was one of Lee's greatest assets as an actor is he just had this amazing speaking voice.
Yes. Yeah, and a desire to use, and he's arrogant as hell, but what the hell, use him. He's also well read. He wanted to bring in stuff he wanted to do free writing, and yeah, I mean, God bless, Dracula, Prince of Darkness is a beautiful looking movie, truly beautiful, and yet it's marred by the fact that it has no dialogue in it, because who knows why? There's all kinds of apocryphal excuses for Dracula to have no dialogue in that movie. This movie, has all kinds of flaws, and yet it has one of the best. I truly think that this monologue as Dracula is worth watching by itself by anybody interested in the character, whether they even watch the rest of the movie ever.
And you can watch it on YouTube and get basically the heart of this whole thing.
Yeah, because the rest of the movie is true. It doesn't hold together as well as it should. There are major problems, Another really great thing going on. Well, I want to mention the sets, and then let's go back and talk a little bit about Christopher Lee's actual physical presence as Dracula. But there are mostly practical sets in keeping with the way that Eurotrash tended to be done. So you've got, a park is generally a park, like in Barcelona, and it looks beautiful. The castles are generally real castles. That one edifice of Castle Dracula that they keep showing is this enormous, as Jess Franco put it, this 14th century Gothic, just giant stone hulk of a building, and these are some great looking castles. I mean, it's really neat to because it doesn't look remotely like a Hammer picture. It looks completely like some kind of other world. I was really, really impressed by that. Maybe not so much by a lot of the inside sets, but certainly by anything practical. And a lot of the inside stuff was practical as well, such as the coffin room. But okay, does anybody want to describe for us the way that Dracula himself is presented here? Drew, you've made mention of it, which is that by the end...
Well, it's Dracula from the novel. It's not the drawing room stage play Dracula, which is what became what we think of as the movie Dracula.
Meaning a tuxedo. The drawing room, you're talking about the tuxedo.
Yeah, with the slick black hair and the red-lined cape and what we think of as the movie Dracula, which is embodied by Christopher Lee in a lot of movies, and of course famously embodied by Bela Lugosi and pretty much a bunch of other actors.
Frank Langella. He also
Frank
had that big collar and all that.
Yeah. This is the mustachioed, gray-haired. This is long teeth. They never have the reveal of fangs lowering down like we think of in vampire movies. It's just when they have close-ups of Christopher Lee speaking, you notice that he has very pronounced teeth.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much Dracula as Stoker describes him, and I love him. I love Christopher Lee as this Dracula, and I love Christopher Lee as the Hollywood Dracula too, and I think my ideal Dracula, if I could, create my perfect Dracula, there would be a fusion of the two somehow. But I really do love Christopher Lee as Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, he's got all the men in this movie, because it's in ostensibly Victorian fashions going on. All the men wear capes except Dracula. Dracula does not wear a cape. He wears a big cloak. He wears a skinny tie, sort of a Bat Masterson tie in my mind. He wears, he has his hair slicked back. He looks so much like the book character. He has this prominent mustache. It's a very interesting look, and as the character goes on, as we check back on him, because he shows up to attack various members of the cast, he gets younger as he goes along, and that's pretty cool. So I was really impressed with this. Go ahead.
What's interesting? I mean, what we're describing now, we're talking about now, is basically what I think is the centerpiece of this whole picture. It seems that, and I think that Jamie brought up a really good point. The women that show up here pretty much are just food, and you might say that it's a function of the time this was made. But I think that if you look at the men, they're wildly two-dimensional. Renfield comes and goes, and he dies, and it's Klaus Kinski who's a frenetic and very strange actor and has done some amazing things and horrible things, but eminently watchable. But everything is very, you said it was Eurotrash on its best behavior. I think all of this is just designed to be just two-dimensional stick figures around what amounts to be the jewel in this, which is Christopher Lee doing his Dracula. And everything else, the plot is the plot. If you think about it, Van Helsing is even wildly ineffectual. And I think really you're talking about it's just a study of Dracula with enough plot to make it sort of string together.
And to kind of be 90 minutes long. Right.
And I think that's what it is. I think it's really just meant to it's masquerading as a full-on picture, but really it is just this whole. It's a centerpiece. It's using Lee as a centerpiece in his Dracula, a different take on Dracula, and that's interesting for us because you just don't see it anywhere else. But to judge it as an overall cinematic experience and look at the plot and everything else as close to the book as it is, it has a tremendous number of failings in its plotting as well. A lot of things that just
my darling wife, when we first started having a relationship, I have a book, and I'm actually looking right at it right now, that has Frankenstein, Dracula, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in one volume. Uh-huh. And Jamie, I'm sure, could probably go into this, more than me, but she read that all as kind of an effort to get to know me. And when we were
was that the plot of Fight Night 2? Wait a minute.
What now?
Go ahead.
And Jamie, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But
it wasn't get to know you, Drew. I it was more just to kind of, have more of a gothic background, I guess, into what you're into. I'm
flattering myself.
Yeah, I think flattering yourself. I think you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice here. I would not ever compare you to Dracula or any character.
Well, what I meant by that is exactly what you said.
Okay, so Jamie read. So I'm trying to understand those.
The point I was making. We were just
remarking that that's a wonderful and lovely sacrifice to do, to read through all three of those for you. And I think it's wonderful. But anyway,
I thought they were entertaining. It's not that they're not bad stories. They kind of lasted this long.
The reason why I bring this up is when we were watching this movie. And we watched the documentary first, and you saw just Franco talk about how his goal was to make the most accurate version of Dracula. When we were watching this movie, when it deviated from the novel, you seemed like you got more irritated than I did.
I did. I was very irritated because of first hearing him say that. I expected it to not necessarily go at it verbatim, but kind of follow the plot line, and it does a little bit. But
there's a major problem with following the movie. I'm sorry, Jamie, I interrupted you. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I thought there were a lot of just little idiosyncrasies and really big ones that just didn't seem, I don't know, like maybe just Franco had ever read the book.
I think he did, but if the problem is really it gets more as it goes along.
He failed. So I just thought that was an interesting thing. Because I agree.
He does make a big deal about how he says it follows along with the book, and I think if you judge it by the first 20 minutes or so, or 30 minutes or whatever it is, you go, hey, this one's scoring pretty good. But here's the thing. The beginning of that book is all told from one narrator, and so it's easy to adapt. It's super easy, because it's just this one guy, Harker. He's going to go. He's going to get, people are going to warn him. He gets to the castle. The crazy, sexy vampire chicks get after him. He escapes. That's all good. At that point, the book goes wild, and you've got like 4 more narrators in different forms. They're doing journals. They're reading into tapes. It gets complicated, and it just becomes, I think, very difficult for
I don't know. I disagree completely, actually. Yeah? I feel like I don't understand why it would be so hard to take that book and really just make it into a movie that actually follows the plot line, like, pretty much
well,
dead
you
on.
could make the
Bram
argument
Stoker is
that
a little bit. I think the Bram Stoker Dracula is closer, or the one from the 90s is a closer adaptation to the book than this one is.
Plot-wise, you're exactly right. I think when it comes to the plot, that movie is much, much closer than this movie is. However, all the dialogue and all the things that the characters want gets all flipped around, so you kind of pick your poison. There's it's that one introduces a love story that isn't necessarily there in the novel. But you're exactly right. If you want to try to remember all the beats of the novel, they are more correctly, and it's always interesting, So
the thing that Jamie brings up about the way the women character, Mina is a very big character in the book, and as flawed as the Coppola film is, Mina is much more substantial and more like the version in the novel than what we're given here. And the big thing, the big thing that Mina has in the last act is her bond with Dracula, and they give that to Renfield here.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're right. They get rid of all that. The person who has the psychic connection to Dracula here is Renfield. And I also got to say, it is really crazy. This movie uses shorthand to go through the basic beats of the novel. It's not quite wrong. It just essentially eliminates one of Lucy's suitors. It pretty much eliminates the character of Mina. It turns her kind of into nothing. The good stuff, the two things that I think work really great. First of all, back at the castle, I feel we should mention, I love, and this had a super important effect on me all through my life, including now, I love the whole sequence where Jonathan Harker has the nightmare and the brides of Dracula find him in the big coffin room. Oh, it's great. I love that. First of all, watching them rise up in the superimposition, it's just a double exposure. It's a very simple effect. But watching them come out of the coffins and come towards him, first of all, this one, Drew, is like way just a lift from the Lugosi version, almost. Because the way they come forward and then gather is very much like the way they are in the Lugosi one. But you have Dracula doing lines from the book, because they're about to make a meal of Harker, because they're going, look at him, he is so young, the kisses for us all. It's wonderful stuff. And then Dracula comes out of nowhere and says his classic line, back, this man belongs to me. I never forgot that. That had a profound effect on me when I was young, and I've always remembered that. Not least of which because Dracula then feeds them a baby. Where, when he reaches, he just goes, you, go eat the baby. And
and honestly, other than the Coppola Dracula, I don't think there's too many other Dracula movies that I can think go there with the baby eating.
Right.
And I'm surprised they did, actually. I'm surprised. Because the only time I had seen it was in the Bram Stoker's Dracula, which, by the way, I still love. But I had not seen it before. I thought, how's this where are they going to go with this? And then the baby seemed to sort of show up out of nowhere. I went, oh my God, 1970, they went with the baby? And I was really surprised. And I was trying to see if they were trying to be faithful or shocking.
Both, man. I mean, they're in a way they're saying very much what Coppola was going to say, 20 years later, where he would go, you think you know, but there's stuff you don't know, and I'm going to show it to you, and so there's that. Now, there's a scene that's not even in the DVD I watched, but I remember it from earlier viewings of this film, where at some point before Harker busts out, there's like this peasant woman beating on the front gates of Dracula's castle, because he's stolen her baby to feed to the, so that has its own sort of miniature storyline that goes on. In that, the woman pleading for the return of her baby that's going to be fed to the vampires, that was just considered too harsh, and it's been cut from the version that I have on DVD. I remember it distinctly, and this isn't like Biggs in Star Wars. I did see this scene. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they do a baby thing in Badham's Dracula with Langella, but it's not the Brides of Dracula, but it is, isn't it?
I don't remember.
It's Mina when she attacks
She attacks the little kid.
Right.
Well,
but that's also all from the book. That's also all from the book.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Bloofer Lady. This character that shows up in every adaptation of Dracula, and Jamie, you love the Coppola version, and the Bloofer Lady, as she's called, and that one is just wonderful. I mean, such a fantastic character. The Bloofer Lady is the thing that Lucy transforms into after she's turned into a vampire, and she's, in that one she's like a giant white flower. In this one, she's, the very lovely, it's Soledad Miranda, right? And just standing at the edge of the park and beckoning the little children to come unto her. This also I think works pretty well. I think all this stuff really. So that's actually up and towards the middle of the film. That stuff is working pretty well for me. The business of Lucy being a vampire, and I think it really begins to fall apart, mainly in the second half, when there's a lot of sort of fussing around to figure out what they're going to do about Dracula and whether they're going to go after him.
The thing that I find frustrating is there's so much talking about Dracula, but you can tell that Christopher Lee had already had to leave the set. So there's a lot of close-ups of Dracula standing at the edge of his estate, and then they'll zoom over to whomever's supposed to be affected by Dracula. And I understand that's budgetary, and this was a low-budget movie, but it just neuters any effect that Dracula would have. And you can just tell, there's this scene where later on where Van Helsing and Dracula are supposed to be talking to each other, and you can just tell that Herbert Lammott and Christopher Lee were not in the same room. It's just the way it's cut. It's terrible. And Herbert Lammott is an actor I like a lot, and I think he's actually well cast as Van Helsing. The script kind of wastes him, because I think you could have probably Herbert Lammott probably could have been the best Van Helsing we've ever had.
He's not well served here. He's not used well.
Yeah, I can't explain it at all. I have no explanation.
Going back to the, I didn't even realize Christopher Lee was supposed to be in the room when Van Helsing has his little weird heart attack, which I was like, what is he doing? At first,
that was confusing.
We were both really confused by that.
I was confused. I don't think Dracula is supposed to be in the room at that point. At that point, he just looks up from his desk and seems to have we only know later that it's a stroke. It's totally confusing, and so consequently it just sort of derails the movie.
Yeah, that's why he can't walk later, is because he had a stroke.
Except that he can walk when he decides to. It's.
I thought he was just weak because he'd had the heart attack. I don't know. I didn't know they said stroke. Because anybody back in those days gets a little sick, and that's the first thing they do is throw you in a wheelchair. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, he does have some dialogue about it. He says a mild stroke. But the thing is, it doesn't pay off. We never know exactly why did he have a stroke randomly.
You want to know why he had that stroke? It's because they
couldn't.
He doesn't have to go. Yeah, they couldn't afford to send Herbert Lammott on the vampire hunt with Quincey and Jonathan. That's really it.
That's what. Thank you.
That makes sense.
I think that's absolutely right.
I think so.
And unfortunately, that means we are stuck at the end of this movie with two characters with all the charisma of a block of wood.
Right. One is blonde, and one is the model like Jonathan Harker. They're two very handsome men. Indeed.
Well, the funny thing is they've named this character Quincey Morris, but he's actually much more like Arthur Homewood.
He is indeed. He is very much like Arthur Homewood.
Yeah, because he's certainly not the cowboy from Texas with the big Bowie knife.
Yeah. you know, at this point, they really are taking a lot of the same shortcuts that the Lugosi picture took. You know,
I believe they say in the States, he's a goner. Like, that was great. Like, that was so ridiculous.
You know, you bring up the Lugosi thing, but the Lugosi picture at least has the excuses that it's not actually based off the novel. It's based off the Hamilton Dean play.
That's correct.
So,
yes.
You know,
and
even that
is a much better director.
The Hamilton Dean play does not have Dr. Van Helsing as the head of the sanitarium.
No. The Bela Lugosi version is based off the Hamilton Dean play, not this.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying that a lot of the folding in of characters is very similar to the choices made in that play. You know, it's like lifting Seward out from being one of the young suitors of Lucy, and instead making him the guy who's running the sanitarium, which I guess he was all the time. Except
he's
for
not
the
even
novel.
running it. Van Helsing is technically the one who's running it. Seward is like the second-hand guy. They demote him.
I guess that's true. Whereas in the novel, Seward has to call Van Helsing to come and check out.
I think they did that because they didn't want to have the whole business of calling Van Helsing in. Also, it's just Van Helsing is such a interesting character and you know, kind of a beloved character in the horror genre that I think they know that we're more interested in him than Dr. Seward. So there's just like, well, why not just make Seward a second in command anyway? But
well, and that's exactly what would happen again. Remember in the 1979, the Badham Dracula, same thing. If I recall, Van Helsing is Seward. Okay, so in that one, Donald Pleasance plays Seward, and Seward is running the hospital. But what about Van Helsing? Van Helsing, I guess he's brought
in the Badham Dracula.
Yeah.
No, they call him in the Badham Dracula.
They call him because Mina is his daughter, and and he's they call him in, so he shows up in London because Mina dies.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because she's sick, I think initially, and he's prescribing laudanum and a bunch of stuff. But that's the connection.
Yeah.
He only comes up later with. He doesn't talk about how he's been studying the black art.
You know, the thing that's such a waste here, and I hate to direct away from this, but the thing that to me is really wasted here is they had Klaus Kinski as Renfield.
Yeah.
He's barely in the movie. He has almost no audible dialogue. And he has no scenes with Christopher Lee. And Christopher Lee, who never got a proper Renfield in any of the Hammer Draculas. So this is really the first Dracula movie where he has this character. And we never see the two of them in the same room together. And it's just, that's sickening to me.
And yet, I do love this performance as Renfield. I think he's a good Renfield. I don't mind him not having lines.
Listen, I don't know. He doesn't seem to embody any of the stuff you sort of expect from a Renfield, really.
I feel the same way. I think Renfield to have that like desperation to absorb energy and power and life from whatever he can, or that obsession of becoming, immortal or, living forever or whatnot. There's no mention of any of that. He just seems like he's a crazy dude eating bugs out of the toilet. Like,
well, I mean, we get Van Helsing monologue about him, but I see your point.
His daughter, and I understand that. Like, that's, trying to help, plot setups and whatnot. But even that, they talk about, there's a horrible scream, and then the daughter is dead, and he's gone crazy. Well, that's it? How come
No, I grant you. Well, he should at least be put to some use, like kidnapping Lucy and bringing Lucy to Dracula.
He almost does obey Dracula's apparently extremely remote command to kill the girl.
but that
and he is useful in telling them where Dracula's going. So that's useful. That actually he serves a plot point. I'm just saying I was okay with all of this.
There has never been a better Renfield than Dwight Fry.
That's true. I agree with you. Although I have to tell you, again, this is Klaus Kinski, and there's that story when Werner Herzog met Klaus Kinski, and he met him because he heard this sound next door, and for 3 days, a guy was destroying the room next to him. And he went in there, finally, after 3 days, and not a stick of furniture remained, and there was Klaus Kinski, stark naked, after a 3-day rage. This is Klaus Kinski, and he plays, and he's now directed to play Renfield, who has all the pathos and also the manic, wild, hysterical potential of somebody who is promised eternal life in some way, although maybe not in this particular picture, but not able to achieve it, and on the brink of madness, or if not well on the other side of it. And this is what you have: somewhat catatonic, looks out the window a lot, eats bugs occasionally, and just kind of drops off the hook and dies. It seems like an astonishing waste.
Yeah, I see that. I do. So let me put it this way. I think he's not a very well-written character, but I think it's a very interesting performance. You know, so
well,
I
that's
think
because you have an interesting actor. I'm not saying he gives a bad performance. I'm saying they could have done so much more with this. Like they could have had a Renfield that rivaled Dwight Fry. They could have.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to point out in this middle section before we get to the final section is Dracula's seduction of Lucy is really what basically makes up the Lucy, which is Soledad Miranda, the very beautiful 20-something with 60s eye makeup in her Victorian dresses. Dracula is obsessed with her, and he's using his psychic powers to draw her across. It borders on silly because for like 10 minutes of screen time, the only word spoken by anybody on screen is Lucy, with Dracula whispering, Lucy, and Mina following Lucy, shouting, Lucy? And so, I mean, literally. And then when they cut to the next scene, the first thing out of, Jonathan Harker's mouth is Lucy. So there's this, it's actually a fun game to sort of watch all of this and try to figure out how long the movie can go with only Lucy as the line of dialogue.
A fun game is actually you pour yourself a shot, and every time you're with friends, and every time you hear the name Lucy, you drink.
Oh, God.
For some reason, and I'm sure I was probably annoying Jamie how many times I mentioned this, I just love the round windows in Lucy's room. I thought they were so cool. I don't know why.
Yeah. All the sets, these sets are gorgeous. These sets really, really, I mean, I'm serious. This is a good-looking movie. Go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think the sets are gorgeous. I think they actually are the best part of the movie. Like, the movie aesthetically is pleasing for the most part. And, I don't know, I just kind of feel like it all just feels like such a waste to me. Like, they have these amazing sets and these kind of cool ideas. Like that, you know.
Yeah.
The taxidermy.
I mean, and how many times have we seen that happen, right? I mean, to be honest, that's a common thing to go wrong with a film. You go, wow, well, the guy who made the sets, he did his part, and Bruno Nicolai with his, hammered dulcimer score, he's really bringing it, and yet somehow there's something that's not happening here.
Well, Jamie actually was about to bring out I think the standout point, and I'm glad she brought it up. There's the whole sequence where the vampire hunters are attacked by Dracula's taxidermy.
They're not really attacked. They're more like snarled at, and like they kind of shake their bodies out. Like they couldn't have, they couldn't have like wired some of the animal's jaws. I mean, I guess that would have kind of been a little bit of a gross thing to do, but I made them a little bit more puppet-like so that they could have been a little bit more animated with their their movements, as opposed to just like the zooming in and out of like the characters.
This is a goofy idea.
I feel like
such
George
a
Harrison
goofy
loves that
idea.
idea. I think George Harrison totally, again, like, talk about taking an idea and making it your own. I mean, I wonder if he saw this movie and then was like, hey, I got my mind set on you. You know?
Oh, God.
Wow. I can't even, good Lord.
Remember that video?
No, actually, of all the things from the 80s to bring up, I'm so sorry, I don't remember the video.
Oh my gosh, Jason, you need to look that up. Because if you love taxidermy and you love it when it moves, then you're going to love that video.
Oh my gosh, that's really
Now
funny.
I'm trying to remember if I've ever read anything about George Harrison being a horror movie fan.
I mean, but what's weird here is that this is a very goofy idea, because it's this idea where, okay, you vampire hunters are going to walk into sort of the ante-room of the Carfax Abbey, Dracula's castle in London, and you're going to walk in the ante-room, and Dracula's got a lot of taxidermy in there, and all of a sudden, all the taxidermy is going to freak you out. It's not going to really do anything. It might move a little bit, but mainly it's just going to put a psychic whammy on you and freak you out. That's sort of what seems to be going on.
Right.
It's a dumb idea. I mean, I have to admit.
Let me ask a question. Is it serious? I saw it too. I thought it was silly as hell. I should not elicit a belly laugh. You know, when you're watching Dracula, you shouldn't be laughing. You just shouldn't.
Yes.
So the question is was it meant to be serious and just super low budge and terrible because of it, or was it meant to be a moment of a serious question, or was it meant to be I don't want to say light, but was it meant to be just a strange, not a totally serious idea, not tongue in cheek either, but was it meant to be a beat that was? You mean a
Stephen King kind of irony, where Stephen King will have like a toy start goofing around and scare you, but also.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this was meant straight. I mean, this is when you watch old movies and you see kind of things looked a little cheesy. They, you know, maybe to the like, yes, we've all been educated in horror flicks and whatnot, but you know, think about like a child watching this movie. That would be really scary for a kid. That would creep me out if I was a child, just the idea of it. Because I remember when I was a kid, whenever I saw a taxidermy, I used to always think, like, you know, if I was in a room with it, it would feel like, you know, you feel like its eyes follow you. And so it kind of, I think it's playing on that idea. But I just think they didn't do it well. Like, it
You know, you were reminded of the George Harrison video, and I think that's an excellent point. It immediately makes me think of the taxidermy coming to life in Evil Dead 2, which is played partly for laughs, but it's also creepy as hell because they have this very well animated animatronic puppet deer head.
Well, you remember the half dog in.
Return of the Living Dead.
Return of the Living Dead. So, and that's the way the effect is. I mean, that's a really gross one. But the point is, it's supposed to be something like that. Either that, or we've all seen scenes where somebody is having a psychological horror kind of breakdown, and they go into a room and like mannequins or whatever standing around, you know, the cigar store Indian is freaking them out, and that's always conveyed through the use of like big fisheye lenses on the statue. And the point is, here for some reason, gamble though it is, doesn't pay off, and that's okay. You know, we move on pretty quickly, but it's something that everybody always remembers. What's wild here is that the movie moves extraordinarily fast at this point, because they frustrate Dracula, because they
sanctify his coffin.
Yeah, they sanctify his Carfax Abbey, so Dracula can't go back there. So Dracula at this point decides, screw it, I'm giving up on my invasion of England and I'm going home. And on the way, before doing that, I'm going to stop by and try and kill Mina and face off against Van Helsing. Because that's the only other scene that happens, is he comes into Van Helsing's and they have their standoff, which, as you said, has some problems because the two actors are not in the same room. And then that's it. Then we cut straight to the climax, because now Dracula's booking it back to Transylvania, and the good guys are booking it back to try to beat him there so that they can...
Well, they do beat him there. They kill the brides of Dracula. They throw some rocks on some... As Jamie pointed out to me while we were watching it, because she's astute like that, you know, in the novel, you kind of get the sense that the gypsies are somewhat aware of who they work for.
Right.
These people seem like they're just kind of...
They're just tobacco merchants.
And they throw boulders on them and kill them.
They rather casually racist. They just sort of kill all the gypsies working for Dracula, and so that they can get to him.
And then they open up his coffin, and I'm convinced. I think Christopher Lee wasn't there for this either, because he never gets out of his coffin and tries to defend himself, and they just light him on fire.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I don't think they ever intended that there was going to be a better choreographed action scene here.
But and that's one of the things that makes me frustrated with this movie, because, you know, I hate to say it, as much as I know this makes you want to grind your teeth, Jason, the ending of the Coppola Dracula is a lot better than this.
No, I agree. There is a lot better. There's a lot to recommend. The ending of the Coppola picture. I think if you could just go through and use some sort of video editing software to remove all of Dracula's dialogue, really in the whole movie, you'd have a much better film. And I
would be okay with removing the love story, and then, you know, kind of like removing Jar Jar Binks from Episode 1.
Yes, I mean, but I would also certainly remove Dracula at the end saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which is the most absurd, crazy Jesusization of Dracula I've ever. I don't even know how. I don't even know where to go with that. That's the nuttiest thing I've ever seen happen in a movie. It didn't make any sense to me at all.
In the Bram Stoker Dracula, you don't think that makes sense? That a man who loses his family after, like, you know, being at war forever feels like he's being forsaken by God?
Yeah, I mean,
after fighting in a kind of semi-religious war.
But Dracula, I mean, so I grant you,
See, you have to keep in mind there is that religiosity that goes in hand, like, with Dracula and vampires.
Yeah, but that line comes at the end, and this Dracula's not a nice guy. I mean, so you're exactly right. Dracula was a major Catholic warrior, and one of the most interesting things to me about Dracula is that the Pope was really interested. Real Dracula. The Pope was very, very interested in getting plenty of money to help Dracula fight the Ottoman Empire. So the Pope was running around writing letters to everybody in the world saying, "Listen, Dracula's a good guy. Give me a lot of money because we're going to front Dracula's army and he's going to go beat the Turks." And so, yes. So the idea of that guy, you know, being betrayed by God, I kind of get it. The thing of it is, I don't know.
Well, it is such a 90s idea.
Yeah.
Losing
your
religion.
I mean, Dracula. The thing
Jamie,
is, Dracula.
I think you just won the podcast with that.
I mean, the problem to me with Dracula is that in the Coppola picture is that I can't stop thinking of Dracula as a sexual sadist who was also a brilliant military strategist. Those are really the two key things about Dracula. And that movie
loves Mina in the Bram Stoker's one. Like there is that love story, and I feel like, and you're supposed to kind of, you know, take that Mina's, you know, that the reincarnate of his deceased love, you know,
Right. Don't even get me started on that. I mean,
I know.
So,
that's like a free plotline thing they do in lots of movies where somebody's reincarnated, you know,
come up with that. Yeah.
because it might look a little bit alike. But at the same point, I think that line, just going back to that line, I don't feel like it's so out of place because it's now the second time in his life where he feels, you know, forsaken. You know.
Can we all agree that it's better, no matter what you think about what leads up to it, it's still better than Christopher Lee looking confused and getting torched?
Yeah.
That was a bit ridiculous. But that was the way all the vampires were. All the girls, when
these were some puny vampires at the end of the day. They didn't have a lot of fight.
This is not an ending.
No.
This is not a solid ending. It doesn't have doesn't have a major conflict at the end with Dracula and he's somehow it's not a real ending. It just seems like they kill the guys. Yeah, it really is. That's a giant letdown for the whole thing.
Although I do love the fact that they tossed his coffin over the side of the castle. Which doesn't make sense either, because I was like, if he's like burning for a minute or two, but actually it's not even that long.
No, you're right.
And then let's just throw it over. So I don't know, maybe the wind puts him out, and then
there's an opportunity for him to come back. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Then, let's get those gypsies who we just killed the heck out of to come and our boss. He's our paycheck.
Maybe one of them is going to grab his ring and go bring him back to life. Yeah,
I think that the scene that happens immediately after the ending of his movies is the gypsies' family coming and tossing Quincey and Jonathan off the side of the castle. Like about 20 gypsies, like, hey, what's the? We were just trying to earn some an honest day's pay. It's like
we're looking for wheat.
I know we need to wrap things up, but I have one question about if there's some sort of parallel symbolism or not, or if it's just me desperately looking to find something in this movie. But with the whole thing with Renfield, like jumping out the window when Christopher Lee's coming, like I should say Dracula, coming out, he's coming down the hallway, and you're like, what is Renfield doing? He's like, suddenly he manages to break through, he lifts up the bars, and he falls out the window, and he just stuck. But he's still alive.
The water's falling. Harker leaps out of the window of Castle Dracula.
Everybody falls in the window.
Yeah, and Dracula finally falls.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dracula's kind of thrown. But
true.
I think you may be giving just Franco a little too much credit.
I think not enough. I think it's just, unfortunately,
I just can't figure out what it was.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I feel like I've dogged on Jess Franco a lot on this, and I actually do like his movies. I just don't think he's that talented. And is that wrong? Like, can you feel that way about a director and still enjoy their work?
I guess I feel that way. I have a real fondness for all those Spanish werewolf movies, and they're all terrible. But I find them very watchable because to me they're not even movies. It's not a movie like American Beauty is a movie. It's a movie in terms of it's just something to catch images of and be like inspired by. Oh, like I like that bit. I like that bit.
Well, I do feel like this
werewolf movies. Are you talking about like werewolf in a or in a girl's dormitory, like those?
Oh no, he's talking about Paul Naschy.
Yeah, that's right, Paul Naschy. Yeah.
Movies, which I have yet to inflict on you because I'm merciful. But this to me is Franco's most literate work. Like, and that
it is.
Although it's also
Vampires Lesbos isn't.
Right, that's the whole thing. This movie is a very, very, what's the word? I mean, it's a very restrained film for any. I mean, and we've said it's also quite dull. That's maybe one of the problems, but it's very restrained. And so
Franco I think of is kind of more in the a Russ Mears kind of Russ Myers kind of. Myers, has more, okay, yeah, he's a little obsessed with big boobs. He's got kind of an eye at the same time. Like, Franco, I don't know that really has that. I mean, he does every now and then. There's some stuff in it. I agree with Jason. There's some images that I find beautiful. And, Lord knows, I don't think I've ever made anything that's probably as good as the good parts of this movie. So,
that's cool.
I love you, honey. But I couldn't. I mean, all I can say is my own stuff. I'm not sure that I have either. But I don't think I've ever done anything that falls apart quite in the same way either.
Just Franco. Okay, we can give props where props are due, but the props are not due for this one, fellas. And there is no reason to be tearing down your own work to kind of.
No, that's not at all what we intend. So let's move away from that because that's not at all the intention. But I think this is a movie that has some really beautiful images in the beginning that. And it just doesn't quite live up to it in the end. Now, let me ask you guys.
And it also has some terrible day. It also has some terrible night, day for night.
Day for night and dogs.
Some of the worst day for nights I've ever seen.
So the fact that I watched this movie when I was like 8, and it profoundly affected me and made me want to be into Dracula. Do you think that affects my ability to view it today? Do you think I give it extra points?
I think you seem like you're being objective. I mean, I feel like
this is more about me than just the way that we watch movies in general.
Okay, Jason, I'm going to come out with a little bit of a confession right now, because sometimes the movies that we love as children, yes, they may profoundly shape us, but when we do go back, I think we can see the flaws in the mirror, but like. My story, my movie when I was a child that I felt so like a kinship with was Rat Boy. Of all movies, Rat Boy. Do you remember that movie?
No, I don't.
Clint Eastwood's wife was the star of it, and it was about a guy who looks like he's part rat. And he lives in like a sewer, and then they bring him to the up top and to the reality, and everybody he becomes like a kind of a tabloid sensation, and he goes on the run, and wackiness ensues. But it's mostly a drama, oddly enough. And
holy God, that's amazing! Yeah. I've never heard of this film, although I see now that it has effects by Rick Baker and it stars Sandra Locke.
Yeah.
So
Clint Eastwood's first or second wife. And
yeah, no, absolutely. She's the one who played the killer in
There's a lot of his.
Which is the Dirty Harry movie where Sandra Locke was killing rapists. That was it was one of my favorite. It was like my favorite Dirty Harry movie, actually.
Oh, you should watch that one. But you'll see when you watch it how flawed a movie it is. And, but as a child, I remember feeling like that was the most intense and dramatic movie I had ever seen. I cried every time I watched that movie. Every time. And I watched it now, or a few years ago, and I couldn't help. I was like laughing at the parts where I would have been crying. Like sometimes like, oh man.
I don't know what you two are talking about. My favorite movie is Ghostbusters, and it just holds up fine.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes you can't go back. Listen, I watched a lot of Mario Bava when I was a kid, and which probably explains a lot. But but I mean, he was a gifted filmmaker in a lot of ways. And I've never seen this movie before, and I just think I was because I'd never seen it before. I was like, wow, I'm astonished that I haven't seen this, but I'm excited about it. And though it doesn't pay off, there are little bits and pieces that work, so you can be sort of elated about the things that work, but judging it as an entire piece, I think that, Jason, you probably, there's a touchstone in there somewhere where you kind of go, you get some part of it that reminds you of when you may have seen this before, and that's good. Yeah. But obviously your vocabulary, your cinematic vocabulary, and your genre vocabulary, and just everything is so much more advanced. When you really look at it with a critical eye, you see the stuff doesn't work, but you have the perspective of, oh, you like that back then. You can enjoy that. You can enjoy that emotional connection with it, whatever it was back then, with your younger self. But at least you have the perspective. It's not like you're watching it over and over again and you're feeling exactly the same things and you haven't moved on from there.
Well, that would be demented. But I think I see your point, and I think I can find great inspiration as an artist from some stuff here. I still think the appearance of the coach at Borgo Pass is a wonderful thing that would be totally, that you could rip off, And this is what, like, Quentin Tarantino does, really, is he's reaching deep into all kinds of great movies, but also pure schlock, and grabbing a few moments, a few seconds sometimes, of footage that somehow he was really inspired by, and lifting it. So we should give our final thoughts. I'll have very little. I promise to keep mine super short because I feel like we've already been wrapping up. But and then we'll come around for endorsements. So let's go. Yeah, it was Adam, Jamie, Drew, and then I'll go. So Adam, final thoughts. Count Dracula from Jess Franco.
Again, like I said in the beginning, I think it's. I was excited to see it because I'd never seen it before. I think it's probably worth seeing, if nothing else, because I really had not seen Christopher Lee doing that kind of a Dracula before. And, if you can catch that on YouTube, you'll get the rest of your life back at the end of your life. You'll get that hour and change back, and I think that's probably a really good thing. But, it's probably interesting if you like Franco and you're looking at his body of work for whatever reason. This is maybe one of those things where it's just the most restrained, the straightest version of whatever he's done, and I think maybe in terms of cinematic history, it probably plays an important role in some way because he's, I don't think he did anything like this before or after. So I think it exists as I think you said, as an oddity, and I think it's worth looking at for that reason. But it certainly doesn't hold up incredibly well. It's not great. But it's really interesting to see Christopher Lee in something that most people really probably haven't seen, unless I'm the odd man out here. So I was excited to kick off the retrospective with something I hadn't seen. So if you see it on YouTube, see it. If not, believe me, there are other things you can watch.
It's on Daily Motion. Sorry, it's free on Daily Motion. You can see it there in English. So, yeah. Jamie, thank you, Adam. Jamie, final thoughts?
I'm kind of along the same lines with Adam, where if you can cut to the good parts, which is only when Christopher Lee is in the scene, which, in my opinion, not enough of the movie includes him. But, again, this is a very low-budget movie. And, I was a little disappointed because we sent for it on Netflix, and it didn't come in time for the podcast, so we went out and rented it at Vulcan Video, and now it just came today, and I was like, oh, man, I feel like double jeopardy. Like I got, this movie came out how many years ago, and I'm getting charged to see it twice. We're getting charged twice to see it once, and, I kind of wish I didn't do it in the first place. I'm not going to get that time back. It wasn't schlocky enough to be schlock, yet it wasn't good enough to be even fair, in my opinion. So, it just
I
kind
like
of
what you said about it wasn't schlocky enough to be schlock. I think that there's something there. Yeah.
There were, you especially coming from Jess Franco, who, Drew was saying earlier, is of the Russ Myers brand, the category. You expect to see some weird, possibly, girl on girl action, or maybe a nipple. Nothing.
Well, to be fair, I'm doing just Franco a huge up by saying that he's even in the same league as Russ Meyer. Actually, Russ Meyer's a more talented director as well.
I don't know. I saw Beyond the Valley of the Ultra Vixens, and I don't think that Russ Meyer. It just depends,
I'm not a big fan of either, honestly, but I can at least kind of see where some of Russ Meyer's films are halfway watchable. Whereas this one, just, like I said, I'm one of those people, I don't tend to fall asleep during movies. I will stay up and I'll watch the whole thing and then go to sleep. And this one, I felt like it put me to sleep. I just could not make it through.
It does have a certain volume-like quality.
But I mean,
yeah.
I fell asleep during the Castle of Blood. I've seen movies like that just make you go to sleep. I'm sorry, go ahead. Continue.
No, I'm just saying that the 12 minutes of Lucy, I just passed right out. I just, couldn't take it. So, if you're a diehard Christopher Lee fan and you're like, I need to see every movie in his catalog, then by all means have at it. But if you're not, do Christopher Lee a favor and don't watch this one.
Wow.
I feel like he himself, this is not a movie he was particularly proud of.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why I kind of felt like it was a little strange to be doing this one as a retrospective. But I understand why now. But
to say that I know he wasn't proud of it. His
performance is still good, but I can honestly say, there's not too many times where I can say Christopher Lee gave a bad performance. So, it's like pizza, even when it's bad, it's good. So yes, in this movie, Christopher Lee, even though the movie's bad, he's still good. So, cut to the chase and go watch it on YouTube.
Very cool. No, you may be right. Okay, Drew, what are your final thoughts on Count Dracula?
I am glad that we did this because, if nothing else, we had a hell of a discussion about this. Now, I will say, this versus Hammer, I like the verbose Dracula here. I still prefer the Hammer Dracula. I think I like the stylishness of those movies. But I do love the good parts about this. Like I said, I think this is about half a good movie to me. And again, it's a good oddity, and we got a great discussion out of this. I think this has probably been, out of all the different Dracula movies that we've done, this has probably been one of the best discussions because we were able to not only talk about this movie, but reflect back on so many of the other versions of Dracula, which is kind of exactly what I hoped would happen when we discussed this movie. So I even though everybody's feelings was mixed, I have to say I couldn't have been happier with the way this discussion went.
Well, that's really awesome. Okay, so Jamie really says, it feels like it's a disservice. I totally hear what you're saying, absolutely hear what you're saying. Drew, I think you have really profound points on watching this movie at least gives us an opportunity to discuss an awful lot. I think if you really just want to see Christopher Lee doing Dracula at his best, probably a YouTube search on this film to bring up some of the monologues at the beginning, probably all you need. I like this movie a lot. It's because at least the first half of it, and the second half, I don't know, play Jenga but there's a great score. You should make the score a part of your writing existence. If you're looking for fun stuff to write to, this kind of creepy, this is a great horror score. And as Jamie and Drew talked about, it's a lot like the recent Sherlock Holmes score mainly in its use of zither, and so if you're
I love that score. That's my favorite Hans Zimmer score.
It's and that harkens back to this. Likewise, we watched Daughters of Darkness a long time ago, and it also had a zither score. And so if you're into that sort of thing, there's a lot of it here. That's a great score. There's some great images. The Borgo Pass is beautiful. The design of Dracula is beautiful. I love the practical sets, the giant Gothic 14th century structures. So there's some good stuff. It is a curio. It does have lots of flaws, but all told, I think it's a good one to kick off the retrospective with, at the very least, because it gives us the opportunity to debate even that. So that's really awesome. Let's do endorsements. I want to hear what you guys are checking out this week or thinking about and want to recommend. So lay it on us. I think, did we start? We started with we start with Adam. Adam, endorsements?
This week, Jodorowsky's Dune, which you may or may not know about this documentary that's come out about the Dune that wasn't, from the mid '70s, and apparently it was astonishing and crazy and a lot of other things. It's one of those things like when you watch Lost in La Mancha or any of those other kind of documentaries about different things that may have been inspired but didn't really come together. It's a very interesting look at this massive creative effort with Giger doing the production design and all in especially Sting and various people all tackling Frank Herbert's giant magnum opus long before the one that came out in was it 86, 85, 86. So
I don't even remember. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Just to think that there was a whole different take, sort of like the Dune that almost was. So and that's on. I think it's on Blu-ray now. It was released to theaters, but it just came out on Blu-ray. I think a couple weeks ago. I saw it on my way somewhere.
Very, very cool. That was 84. I just looked it up. The 80s Dune that did come out with Kyle MacLachlan. That was the 84 movie.
Okay.
Very cool. That's a good recommendation. Jamie, anything you want to endorse?
Well, I have been I started session 2 of Girls Rock Camp this week, and so if you have kids in the Austin area, we got one more session left in August. Get your daughters, get the young women of your family out to Girls Rock Camp. And if you can't send them to camp, you can come out and support, watch the showcase at the North Door this coming Saturday and see all the girls camper bands, do their thing and perform their new hits of their own original material that they wrote within a week. And it's just a really great program. I can't stress that enough. So that's my endorsement for, activity-wise. Or 2 activities. Also, if you're in the Austin area this weekend, come out to the White Horse for Danger Cake's album release party. They're finally getting to celebrate, and we'll be joined by Black Irish Texas and Clem and Clyde's Whiskey Business, so it's going to be a really fun night. And as my entertainment endorsement, I'm going to go with Rita, because, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a new TV series that's out of Denmark about kind of a rebellious woman who's a school teacher, and she has a great way of teaching. And just so really, I don't know, the things that come out of this woman's mouth are totally spot on and brash and honest and not usually suitable for children, but there she is telling the kids. And I don't know, I just found the whole thing entertaining. It's funny, it's quirky, there's also the dramatic side. So it's definitely worth a watch. It's on Netflix, and it's pretty awesome.
Very, very cool. Drew, do you have anything to endorse this week?
My endorsement is totally self-serving. Halloween Man has switched publishers on Comixology. We've gone from Monsterverse over to Sugar Skull Media.
Woo-hoo.
And we're very excited about this. And in honor of this, we're having the under new management sale. And that means the first 5 issues are all 99 cents. Now, today, over the course of the last few days, I've had no less than 5 people come up to me and go, hey, I really, really want to support Halloween Man, but I want to wait till it's in an actual comic book store because I feel like that's the way you should support comic books. And to that I say that is well intended, and I understand that. But if you want to support Halloween Man, please sign up for Comixology. It's free. It's going to, you can get 5 issues dirt cheap, and every fan counts. Like, I can't say this enough. We really, 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 really appreciate your support, and this is a great way to get on board, to follow all the cool stuff we have coming up in the ongoing series. We have a new special coming out next month. We have another special before the summer's out. We have our Halloween issue coming up. You can get caught up very cheaply. And again, you're not dogging comic book stores. You're enjoying comics in a new kind of way. And Comixology definitely treats independent comics, true independent comics, very respectfully, and I've certainly seen that with the way they've handled the move over from Monsterverse to Sugar Skull, because the way they've been so great about all of that. And other times where I've had to deal with it in my now 14, 15-year lives experience of being part of the comic book industry, that's definitely not uniformly the case. Usually, if you're an independent, you get treated like the secondhand, like the redheaded stepchild, the ghetto child. They have given me. They've been so attentive and so good, and so this company is absolutely worth your support if you love independent comics. So please go to Comixology, search for Halloween Man. Check out our 99-cent sale. It's running until Saturday. And please go to my Facebook. Let me know what you think.
Outstanding. And a great endorsement of Comixology. All right. My endorsement actually this week is a book that I've been reading that I'm going to talk about more this week. Cassine Gaines, Gaines, has a new book called We Don't Need Roads, The History of the Back to the Future trilogy. It is a book about the making of Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. Lots of inside dirt, lots of questions answered. Really, really neat reporting with a lot of interview material from Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis and Christopher Lloyd. Great stuff. And I'm going to interview the author Cassine Gaines tomorrow night. So that interview will go out sometime this week, and we're gonna talk about that. It promises to be really cool. So you should definitely check that out. And like I say, we'll talk about it more again on the interview. So once again, thank you guys for being on. Adam, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a delight talking to you. Drew, as always, thank you. And everybody listening, if you are joining us for the first time, great. If you're a friend of ours, please grab your other friends, force them to listen to the show, leave reviews on iTunes. That's really helpful. Come to the Facebook page and engage in conversations and tell us where we got it wrong or right. We really love the recommendations we get because people all the time are saying, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this. And we do take those things very seriously. We love the comments that we're getting, and it's great. So thanks, everyone. We will see you next week with more Christopher Lee. Have a fantastic week. Night, guys.
A fantastic week?
Night.
Yes, a fantastic week. Oh,
you see what I just did there? All right. Good night. Good night.
Oh, good night. Good night. Bye.